why you aren't growing even though you're training hard. Now, while training hard is absolutely a metric that's going to help you grow, it is absolutely not the be all and end all. And just because you're doing it doesn't mean you're going to grow. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be watching this video. So the absolute number one point that you must be doing in order to grow is tracking your lifts, because without that, you kind of don't really have a good metric on the acute term of whether or not you're actually growing muscle. Of course, you can look at photos, you can measure circumferences, but those things are going to be much more over a long period of time, whereas the lifts that you are performing each week are going to be the best determiner of whether or not you're making those micro progressions per week that are going to add up to significant muscle mass in the long term. So obviously once you're tracking them, you got to make sure that you beat them. So each week that just might mean 1 rep, it might mean 1 kilo, an extra bit of volume, say a drop set or a superset, although I'll be very careful with that one. It can also be bettering form, something that a lot of people don't think about, because when we're tracking numbers, we're tracking external load. We aren't tracking what that individual muscle is experiencing, especially if you're having trouble growing a certain muscle. The internal stimulus is going to be where you need to focus. So making sure that form is standardized, or you can take a progression, be like, okay, this one definitely felt it more in the target muscle, even though it was the same weight or maybe even slightly less, and then just make sure to maintain that form going forward. Now, if you know you should be tracking, you are tracking, and you're just not able to, this is where it comes down to, is your plan allowing you to progress? Do you have enough volume to actually drive a stimulus in order to drive growth? Or more commonly, do you have too much volume to where you're not able to recover and therefore not able to produce a larger force the next time and then progress that muscle onwards? So things like frequency, you may be doing it too frequent. The frequency, intensity, volume, triangle is all antagonistic of each other. The place you need to stay roughly within is like, obviously a minimum of once per week. I wouldn't go above 3 times per week per muscle group or muscle itself. If you just stick somewhere in the middle, 2 times per week, you're not going to have issues. When you start going up to 3, you really have to watch your volumes. When you go down to 1, you really have to crank the volume on that day. So anything that you're particularly trying to grow, 2 times frequency per week is going to be the normal ideal. And then volume, how many sets you're doing on that muscle group muscle per day you're training. There's a minimum of 2, and I really wouldn't go above 6 for most people. If you're having, say, you look at a program of, say, even upper lower, most things on the upper day are going to get 2 to 4 sets, and then the lower, same thing, 2 to 4 sets. If you move out to like a push-pull legs, some things may be moved up to 6 sets because it's got a little bit more time to recover in between. 8 sets would be really only if you're doing something once a week frequency-wise, and that would be, I don't know why you would be doing that unless you have some kind of weird specific split. You've already got one body part really far ahead of the other. So making sure that your program is set up to drive progression. What does that look like? Roughly twice a week frequency, somewhere between 2 and 6 sets. If you're not able to progress, go less. Don't add any intensifiers such as drop sets or supersets if you're having this kind of issue. Just focus on the straight sets and progress them. So now at this point, you're tracking, you're hitting the right muscle, and your program is set up to make sure that you are progressing. Now, nutrition is going to be the biggest one. So making sure that you are adequately fueled for your session, and making sure that you are recovering and giving enough nutrients to the body to synthesize the tissues that we want to grow from the stimulus of that session. So what does that look like? Heard a billion times, 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Hit that. If you're hitting that, it's probably not your bottleneck. Yeah, you can move up to 2.5, especially if you're enhanced, but at that point, it's not really going to be the deciding factor of whether or not you're growing or not. Maybe there might be a hair of efficiency you can work out, but if you're straight up not growing, it's definitely not going to be your issue. So if you want to cover all bases, go 2.5 grams of protein per kilogram, you're covered, right? Don't have to think about it. Fats, for naturals, you might have to go a little bit higher, maybe up towards 1 gram per kilogram. It's largely around how you feel. You might need a little bit more, saturated fat, cholesterol. But if you look at somewhere around 0.6 to 1 grams, just enough to feel good. Don't increase it further than that. You're covered there. Then carbohydrates. The biggest one you're going to be titrating up and down. Say you're at 300. What's your body weight doing? You want to increase your body weight by about 0.25% of your body weight per week. You can go a little bit faster, a little bit slower, but that's just sort of a good spot to park yourself to make sure you start getting some results. So you measure your weight each week, each day, and you can add them all together, divide them by 7, get your weekly average, and then do the same thing again the next week, get the weekly average. If it is up by anywhere from, say, you're 100 kilos, anywhere from 250 grams to 350 grams, awesome. You're in the right spot. Keep doing the same thing. As soon as that average starts to dip a bit lower, crank it up. If you make an increase and it's going way too high, or you change your steps, or something changes and you're going way too high, obviously bring it back. So you're aiming to stay roughly within that 0.25% to maybe 0.5% of your body weight per week increases, and that's going to be driven by the protein's going to be stable, fat's going to be stable, and you're moving the carbs up and down in order to create that effect. Then with the timing of the meals, you're just splitting your protein evenly, splitting your fat roughly evenly. I like to keep it away from the training. So I have most of it at night and some of it in the morning, night, because it's going to slow down digestion overnight. And then the carbohydrates are going to be largely stacked around training. So if you've got, let's say, 300 to work with, and we're going to say 5 meals, I'd say pre and post training, I'd push somewhere towards 100 carb each, and then the rest is going to be distributed throughout the day. So, say could you do 30, 30, 30, something like that. For the other meals, so say 30 for breakfast, 100 pre-workout, train, 100 post-workout, 30, 30. If you've got some more to work with, you might play around with it, but I really would try and crank those first. Then when you start getting some more carbohydrates in you to work with, then the nighttime meal is also going to be important, because it's going to facilitate recovery. It's going to help you sleep, which is then going to give you recovery. So making sure to put some there. But the biggest thing is you need that energy availability whilst you're training. It can also help drive an insulin response, which is going to help cut cortisol, which is going to be anti-catabolic if you can get rid of cortisol, essentially. So making sure you're eating enough to slowly gain weight. If you're doing all these things, there's absolutely no reason you shouldn't be growing. You will be progressing, but make sure you're doing all of them. Keep doing them. Do them for a month, and let me know how you go.